if liberal arts are marginalized, that's just, some people's private opinions. Well, then we lose a sense of literature and philosophy and religion giving us access to real truth. So religion, theology, it's not science. It doesn't follow the scientific method, but following indeed a rational method uncovers truth in other dimensions of reality. So don't reduce science to scientism. Just last week, I had the privilege of speaking at Youth Day at the Religious Education Congress in Anaheim. And I had about 400 high school kids in my audience. And the organizers asked me to talk about this famous problem of science and religion, because they knew, as I've been saying for years, that it's a major reason for disaffiliation. That young people say, since religion and science are in conflict, science is obviously right, therefore religion is crazy, and I'm disaffiliating. Well, I've been saying it for years. I said it again that day. I'll say it to you now. This is tragic nonsense. This view that somehow science and religion are implacable enemies, it's simply false. And it's a terrible reason for anyone to disaffiliate from the faith. And so what I want to share with you is what I shared with the young people in longer form, just do it briefly here, looking at 4 points that I think are relevant to this issue. Here's the first one. The modern physical sciences, in a very real sense, came from religion. They can't be in conflict with that which gave rise to them. Now, what am I talking about? First of all, a simple kind of historical fact that, without exception, all the great founders of the modern natural sciences were trained in schools and universities sponsored by the church. As you know, the whole university system came up, as John Paul II said, ex corde ecclesiae, from the heart of the church. The church sponsored the institutions where the great founders of the modern sciences learned their mathematics and learned their physics and learned their astronomy. The church, in a very real sense, was the matrix out of which the sciences came. And I'll make that more specific. The great founders of the modern sciences learned 2 basic truths, theological in nature, that made the sciences possible. Here's the first one. The world, or nature, is not God. Now, that might seem like a commonplace, but it is not. Go back now to ancient times, come up even to modern times. The tendency to divinize nature, to say that nature is divine. Think of ancient peoples worshiping the mountain or the planets or the sun and so on. Look at forms of animism. Look at even today, a sort of deification of nature. Well, see, if you deify the world, you say that nature is divine, you're not going to analyze it. You're not going to cut it up and dissect it and experiment upon it. You're going to worship it in some way. What made the emergence of the experimental sciences possible was a keen sense that nature is not divine. They would have learned that from the theological doctrine of creation. Here's the second great truth they learned also from the doctrine of creation. That nature, though it's not God, is imbued in every detail and in every nook and cranny by intelligibility. What must every scientist assume as he or she goes out to meet the world? That he or she will meet a world that is patterned, that has form, understandability. Now, this is by no means obvious. We take it so for granted. We don't even think about it, but it's by no means obvious that the universe should be marked by an ordered formality that corresponds to the highest levels of mathematics. Why should that be true? What the first scientists learned from the doctrine of creation was that God spoke the world into being. Don't literalize that. It's a symbol of the fact that God, in his intelligence, gave rise to an intelligible world. Now, when those 2 truths come together, the world is not God, so we can experiment upon it, analyze it, and so on. and the world is endowed in every nook and cranny by intelligibility, the sciences can get off the ground. So yes, in a very real way, the sciences came ex corde ecclesiae. They came from the very heart of the church. Here's a second observation I share with the young people, and I'll share now with you, is science and religion are not in competition with each other. Think of two football teams, right, who are competing on the same gridiron. Well, if one team advances, ipso facto, the other team has to retreat. That's what it means to be in competition. So there's a 30-yard gain, then the defense has to move back 30 yards. If the one team gets into the end zone, it means the defense is totally collapsed. The advance of one is paid for through the retreat of the other. Okay. That's what happens when two things are competing on the same field, so to speak. Science and religion are not competing on the same field. Now, you'll hear it from every corner of the culture today. As the sciences advance, well, then religion must be retreating, because religion used to make all these claims, and now the sciences advance, religion has to give way. False, wrong. See, God, analyzed by theology, God and the things of God, God is not an item within the universe. The sciences analyze, explore, experiment upon objects and things, events, and relationships within the empirically verifiable universe. That's the nature of the sciences. Good. Go all the way with that. What will you never be able to do following that method? You will never be able to adjudicate the question of God, because God is not a thing or an item or an event or a relationship within the empirically verifiable universe. Rather, God is the reason why there should be a universe at all. The Creator is not a thing within the cosmos. Therefore, as the sciences advance in understanding the things of the empirically verifiable world, terrific. Off you go. Go all the way. You will not interfere with our knowledge of God. Just give an example of this. Think of a sprawling novel like the Harry Potter stories. Think of, I don't know how many there are, all 7 books or whatever. Think of this long, sprawling story with all these hundreds and hundreds of characters and plots and subplots and things going on, and Hogwarts Academy and the whole world, right? Well, I can name all the characters, and I can analyze all the characters and all the events. Whom will I never find in the story? J.K. Rowling. She's not a character in the story. Rather, she's the reason why there is that world at all. Now, is the entire world of Harry Potter marked in every detail by her mind? Yes, indeed. But she's not an item within the story. So God, yes, indeed, has marked the entire universe with intelligibility. Yes, God is the providential Lord of the entire cosmos, but you'll never find him as an item within the universe. Therefore, science, go all the way, advance all you want, because it's not in competition with God and the things of God. Here's a third, it's kind of related observation. Please, everybody, scientism is not science. I love science. I embrace the sciences, love them, encourage them. But scientism is not science. What do I mean by scientism? Scientism is a weird ideology that says, it's a philosophical perspective that says, all knowledge is reducible to the scientific form of knowledge. So think again of the scientific method. We observe, we form hypotheses, we experiment, we draw conclusions. Great, terrific, works great with the empirically verifiable world that I can use, instruments of measurement and so on. Terrific. But scientism says because that method is so good in analyzing a certain dimension of reality, it's the only way we have access to truth, and that's simply false. Think of a scientist, a chemist, could take bits of the paint that Michelangelo used, and it could tell us all about its chemical composition. But that scientist, qua scientist, couldn't tell us one little thing about why that ceiling is so beautiful. Think of a geologist could, analyze the stratification of the Earth under the city of L.A., but couldn't tell you, qua scientist, one little thing about whether L.A. is being justly or unjustly governed. Think of a play like Romeo and Juliet. There's not an ounce of the scientific method in Romeo and Juliet, but who'd be so stupid as to deny that it conveys profound truths about life and love and heartbreak and relationship? And you see my point. There are all kinds of other ways, literary, psychological, philosophical, that we come to know things that are really true but don't correspond to the scientific method. I fear, everybody, that a lot of our young people are seduced by this weird scientism. Fight it. One reason, it's both cause and effect, I think. One reason is the decline of the liberal arts. If liberal arts are marginalized, that's just some people's private opinions. Well, then we lose a sense of literature and philosophy and religion giving us access to real truth. So religion, theology, it's not science. It doesn't follow the scientific method, but following indeed a rational method uncovers truth in other dimensions of reality. So don't reduce science to scientism. Last observation. Please, 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 Galileo is one paragraph in one long chapter of an even longer book. Now, what I mean is, Galileo is the patron saint of those who say, religion is the implacable foe of science. And so Galileo, who has his courageous Copernican view of the universe opposed by, retrograde, obscurantist priests, the Pope ordering the house arrest of this great scientist, that's the paradigm of the science-religion relationship. Look, it wasn't our best moment. I agree with John Paul II, who apologized with real contrition about the Galileo situation. It was not the church at its best. I'll grant you that. But please do not use that one unfortunate episode as the singular lens through which we see this relationship. As I say, there's this enormously long book of a very positive series of figures who have a relationship between religion and science that's very positive. Let me give you a couple of examples. Copernicus himself, right, the one who gives us the revolutionary view of the cosmos that Galileo advocated. Copernicus was a third-order Dominican. He was a devoutly religious man. Think of Nicholas Steno, generally accepted as the founder of modern geology. Later in life, he becomes a priest and a bishop. Look at Louis Pasteur, the founder in many ways, the father of microbiology. Talk about a benefactor of the human race, by the way. We still speak of pasteurizing milk and other products. Louis Pasteur was a very devout Catholic layman that saw his scientific work in service of the church. Look at Gregor Mendel in the 19th century, the founder of modern genetics, Augustinian monk, who did his experimental work in the garden of his monastery. Think of someone I mention a lot, Georges Lemaitre, 20th century Belgian scientist, educated at MIT and Harvard and the leading schools of the time, and becomes the great advocate of the Big Bang theory of cosmic origins. Lemaitre had to convince people like Albert Einstein that in fact it was correct. Now it's generally accepted. Georges Lemaitre was a Catholic priest. One last example, Sister Mary Kenneth Keller, a marvelous figure who in the 1960s becomes one of the pioneers in what we call now computer science. In fact, she's the first woman ever to get a doctorate in computer science. Well, Sister Mary Kenneth Keller is a religious of the Catholic Church. Now, I could tell you hundreds more stories like that. Galileo, yes, an unfortunate episode. Not the lens through which we should read this thing, but rather of this richly complex history of people positively relating science and religion. So, in conclusion, can I urge today Catholics who are involved in the sciences, I mean physicians and nurses and chemists and physicists and astronomers and teachers of the sciences, can I ask you, speak out, Tell young people why you see no conflict in your own life between your advocacy of the sciences and your religious faith. I think you're the best witnesses to this. We've got to get in the way of this silly justification for people's disaffiliation from the church. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to share it and to subscribe to my YouTube channel.